尖端工程师，整天搞些花里胡哨的框架。堆积无用的依赖吧，就像他们空虚的感情生活。代码写得像他们的约会，复杂混乱，还一事无成。我们女人会去找二手后端工程师，不会去找前端的。这里只有鬼魂，这里只有鬼魂。
Set up here, folks.
这里玻璃破碎，这里差一嘴，是不是他们？看看神经不同情，听我说，失眠还叫我帮忙。把插件转插件，他不听不看不学，都只是cha老板别发言，以为自己是什么年轻高手。这里只有鬼魂，这里玻璃破碎，这里差一嘴。前端工程师连电话号码都要不到，做个网站都能崩溃爆作。自以为写的代码很漂亮，却连个表达验证都搞不定。今天就知道该改 CSS， 连个女孩的心都打不开。这里只有鬼魂。
Almost ready. Almost ready.
这里玻璃破碎，这里差一嘴。
Is my mic still going? Yeah, okay, checking the levels. Camera seems alright.
Yo, I'm the code queen, Silicon Supreme. Your front-end framework's just a broken dream. React Next.js, you think you're so slick, but your components are weak like your GitHub commit. Wouldn't give my number if prod was at stake. Your deployment pipeline's as fake as your take. You can't handle me one way or another. Your code is so disgusting, wouldn't even say hi to your brother. Your React site got funded by investors, bunch of suckers. Your future full of entire refactors. Your React site crashed on site. My vanilla code shines bright. No digits for you tonight. Code like a girl, crush your whole world. Your tech stack's a joke, your coding skills broke. Try to get my number, I return 404. You glorified plumber, just a code 304. Haskell functional, more like dysfunctional. Your pure functions are pure assumptions. You use Rust like it's peak, but still leak that heap. Your pants scream junior dev, you're a script kiddie cheat. Tech streamers got your brain hallucinating, while your code's as shallow as your GitHub rating. You watch the primer gen thinking you're so cool, but your Vim config's your only tool. Your Docker containers are like your game, empty inside and nobody to blame. You flex those stars like they mean something, but your 4 count shows you ain't done nothing. Your Vim skills are like your bedroom game. Lots of fingers moving, but it's all the same. WQ is all you know how to do, while I'm here with macros, leaving you blue. Your muscle memory's stuck on HJKL. You code like you're dating life, going straight to hell. Code like a girl, crush your whole world.
Alright. How's everyone doing today? I think I've got everything. How's everyone doing? Welcome in, everybody. Stop Imperious on YouTube. Good to see you, brother. It's gonna be a bit of a chill, low-key day. I know I said I might not do another review of the state of the industry stream, but I think I've got a few things lined up, so the next one might be another rant. Sup, Laughing Panda? Good to see you. Pure, you're doing well overall. Pure, how did that job thing go? I hope you got it. Imperious says that the tip of his finger was ripped off. You know, that's typical. You're a typical YouTube viewer. Can't even keep your fingertips on proper. YouTube viewers are basically a low tier, bottom of the barrel viewers. They don't even have fingers. Imperious, you have to DM me the story. I'm curious what happened, and then I'll leak the DM out so everyone can see it. It'll be a good time, good content. What I should be asking is, Imperious, are you okay? But really, I don't care. What's up, Apothem? How you doing? You got the offer, Pure? Pure got the offer. Awesome. Maybe there's hope for all of us yet. Not me so much, but maybe for the rest of us. Congratulations, Pure. That's great. I'm glad you got the offer. It's not a development role, but good enough. You'll take it? You'll take it. I'll take it. I'll take it if you don't take it. Imp says he got 100% disability for 6 months. Go lawyers. Sweet, Imperious. That's the way to do it, man. That's the way to do it. Good job, Imperious. Way to milk that ripped off finger. Hey, Ray on YouTube. Have I ever used a Mac? I sure have. Check my Discord. I'll check it. I'll check it later, man. Can't check it right now. Cool. Well, it's great to see everybody. Welcome in. Apothem says I've been good, just working on coding on my own projects. Good. Glad to hear that, Apothem. I'm hoping I can grow at the company into development. Yeah, that'd be a good path. That's a good strategy, Pure. The opportunities might be more ripe than you think. You never know, right? So that's a good attitude to have. You never know if it's going to work out. Maybe you'll get into development and yeah, it'll be good. No, Macs boo. I agree. Macs are boo. Don't use a Mac. Macs suck. Macs are like Rust. They think they know what's good for you, but they don't. They really don't. Don't Rust, don't Mac. Okay, is this the ship game still? Yeah, it's a ship game. Yeah, Imperious. We made a lot of progress on it. We're at the point where we're actually putting together like animations and scenes and little like dialogues and purchases and stuff like that. We're basically at the point where we're building the game, not the what would you call it? Mechanics. So it's a good place to be because it's a little less boring for programmers because putting mechanics into a game isn't quite as exciting. But the big mechanics are done. So yeah, we're We're at a good spot. I'm just super happy to stay in tech. I originally was in customer service. Well, I mean, a lateral move is good that way then, right, Pure? I appreciate the attitude. I really do, Pure. And it's keeping your feet in the water, so to speak. It can't hurt, especially right now when tech hiring is just Mac hate and Rust hate. Spiro is a person to look up to. See, Twitch gets it. And I guess Imperious on the YouTube side, he gets it too. Okay, I guess he gets it too. All right, I'll throw Imperious a bone there. Nice looks way better. Make so yeah, I will. Imperious, you got it. You got it. Well, thanks everyone for being here. I appreciate it. What are we working on today? So it's a bit chill. So I thought I would just kind of give a little bit of an update. Some of the animations are updated. It might be hard to tell on screen, but a few of the NPCs are like move around, like their idle is really just the walk animation because I got lazy. So they're just doing the walk animation over and over, but they're animated. There's a shadow underneath them. So that's good. The battle UI is a bit cleaner. Instead of a big pop-up that you drag around, there are actual icons in the game which will get resized based on like whether you're on mobile or whatever. And I added like, there's a confirmation before you actually do the animation there and your turn. And then the NPCs take their turn. We still have a few animations to fix, like the cannonballs firing. I'm not 100% sure how to do that, but like what I want to do with that. However, overall, the game itself is looking a lot more like a proper game because I did a little bit of a deep dive for a few hours on video game user interfaces, and for the most part, there is a pretty significant balance between when you use icons to intimate an action versus when you use text. So obviously dialogues, for example, I mean, that's pure text, right? And then even the OK button, sometimes you don't need it. You push a button it's just implied that there's a confirmation. But for things like this, which is what I'm working on today, that's why I'm talking about this. This is very much a web-based user interface for supplying your ship. There are actions that happen in the WebAssembly file, and they're attached to interactions you make with the buttons and the input fields and all of that. But in an actual user interface for a video game, it wouldn't really be presented like this. This is I'm web brain. I'm like, this is website brain. It's not game design. So I thought what I would do is tackle maybe one or two menu items and just clean them up and see if we can make them look better today. That would be the goal for the day. Just a little bit less web brained and a bit more video game brained. The goal will be to not have this scroll bar either. Well, vertically I think is okay, but horizontally I think it should not be okay. And if you end up on a smaller screen, it should still fit within the viewport, which I think is going to be fine because I'm so smart. I'm such a good programmer. Like Carmack, eat my dust, all right? I've already made it so that the viewport works on any screen size. So as long as we fix the horizontal scrolling on one size, it should be fixed for all sizes. So we just got to find a way to make this look a little bit nicer, a bit more of like a video game feel. To that end, I have added some icons, which just need to be resized. But for now, they're sufficient. So there's a few new icons, and we're going to use them, and we're just going to see if we can clean up the user interface for this. They are ready to go, but the problem is, well, I had a problem that is no longer a problem. It's annoying to get the XY coordinate of these icons. The XY position needs to be broken up by the grid size. So the XY position is not the same as the grid XY position. To convert that in GIMP, the paint, image editor, there is no way to do that. You have to essentially take the XY position of your mouse cursor and then do the math to convert it to a grid. So this morning I came up with this guy. So it's a stupid little tool. You pull in any file you want, including like the MPC files. This might take a second to load in. And it will overlay on canvas the grid coordinates of whatever you have for an image. So this is going to make my life a lot easier. So I did this really quickly. So now we can tell exactly what the XY coordinates are for each of these little elements. The point of this was so that I could take the icon coordinates here, so I can see where they are. And then we can go over to our, I think it's, yeah, here. I have a naming convention that matches to the coordinates on the atlas so that I don't have to remember the stupid numbers. All this so that I don't have to remember the numbers. But it's going to make it nice. It's and easy to name an icon and give it the proper coordinate. So I already have like thumbs down, which is 4311. We could confirm that. Yeah, 4311. So I think my next step was just going to be part of the stream was just going to be to no, not this. Where is it? Over here. To rebuild the supply UI. So the intent here, the game mechanic that happens here is you're going to have a fleet of ships. So I have one ship, and it has a bunch of cargo, including, well, right now it's got 10, 10, and 10. 10 of water, 10 of food, and 10 of, I think, cannonballs. 10 cannonballs. When you set sail, we need to take into account the crew number. How much crew do you have on your ship? Oh, and by the way, these are pointing in the right direction now, these ships, when they auto sail, which is kind of cool. So the number of crew that you have on each ship will determine the amount of food and water that they use up per day as you travel. Obviously, the amount of cannonballs will factor into how many attacks you can make because you have a limited, it's like ammo, right? But we're not there yet. It's mostly the food and the water, but we'll do the cannonballs at the same time because it's the only three that we care about before you set sail. The idea behind setting sail is that you're supposed to have enough food, water, well, just food and water mostly. You're supposed to have enough food and water to be able to set sail based on how many crew members you have on each ship. If there's even one ship that doesn't have enough food or water or enough crew to steer it or control the ship, you're going to get blocked right here. You're not going to be able to set sail. The number of crew, we're just going to skip over that mechanic for now. We're just going to focus on food, water, and cannonballs. And what happens is you pick, your number of however many of the three you want to you want to add to the ship, and then you click supply, and something's wrong with this. We'll have to fix that. I guess WebAssembly is not loading up the cargo appropriately, blah, 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 blah. But that's the intent here. If we can make this look a little bit nicer and use some icons, make it have a more of a video game feel, then we can essentially copy the user interface over to other menu items, because there are a few. For example, if you're going to remodel a ship, there's this huge horizontal bar for all the different things you can remodel. Cargo space, cannon space, crew space, the type of material, the type of cannon, figurehead. There's quite a bit going on here. So we need to come up with a way to make this look a little better, just a little bit. Give it pretend like you're I don't know, playing a video game, not running an Excel spreadsheet. Like this is just wrong, right? So there's a few of these. There's also the where is it? Here it is. Purchasing items. This is not so bad. I would like to make this a little better though. And buying goods. So different ports will have different goods based on economic factors, and you can do a you can buy from one port and then sell those goods at another. So I don't know. This is still not bad, I guess. And then you have to load it onto a ship, right? You select how many goods you want to buy of a particular good, and then you have to load it onto one or more ships. This could also use some work, but that's kind of the point of the stream today. So I don't think it's going to be a very long stream, but I just thought, since I'm working on it, might be good to catch up with you guys and see if we can clean this up a little. All right. Okay, so we're going to start here. No, Imperious, I will not. Tech job market is madness. It is madness. It's crazy. I think what I would like to do is, I had an idea where, since I'm tackling this here, it might be nice if I created a user interface that would work when you don't have a keyboard and mouse. So that even if you're on a browser, but you decide that you want to use your gamepad, like a Xbox controller or something, I have one around here somewhere, that you can essentially operate the game without keyboard mouse input. So I was thinking, well, what do other video games do? And they essentially create their own buttons, and your directional keys just highlight whatever button you've directed the game to highlight, and then you hit A, B, whatever button you're hitting for a confirmation, increment, decrement, whatever it is, and a number goes up or down, things like that. Or you use it for inputs, for text inputs. So if that's what we're going to do, then I am going to put somewhere in here, I'm just going to start putting in a new HTML, like, I don't know, line, I guess. Maybe where'd it go? Headers, ships. I think it's the supply function, wherever I'm using it. Yeah, this guy here. So maybe above, I'll just start a new HTML element, and it's going to contain the new UI that we're going to use. So I'll start with the simplest thing I can think of. We're just gonna dummy out we'll say an up arrow, a down arrow, and then in between will be like a number. So I guess 3. And we'll just give it a bit of a gap. And we'll margin it. Margin bottom. Okay. So if I'm going to do that, then I need to put in the coordinates for the arrows. The coordinates for the arrows. 4312, 4412. So oh man, I'm so glad. I'm so glad I did that. It's going to save me so much time. Okay, so we've got an up and down arrow. We're going to go like how on earth was I getting the background image? There's a background image. It has to be the atlas. And you know what? I know what I'm going to do. I'll just go like this. I'll go atlas image, and we are going to copy. Here we go. That's what I wanted. Right here. I should probably create a function to make that a lot easier, shouldn't I? If I was any intelligent person, I would do that. Hey, Laughing Pen, it's an appropriate size stream. It's not a small stream. It's cold out. Is it cold out? I'm just going to ignore the stream comments. Is it cold out where you are? We're getting like summer weather up here in Canada, eh? You'd think with all our igloos we'd be living in winter all year round, but it's just not the case. So it's not really Atlas X or Y. Here, you can go off to the side. It's actually, I believe the variable name here is called Atlas Chords. Yeah. And icon up arrow. Yeah. Okay. So that looks good. And then we'll just do like a number. There, you know, no, 69, because come on. And then we'll do the down arrow. Okay, let's see how that looks right now. Well, looks like a whole bunch of nothing. Yeah, Imperious? Code scares you? Don't worry, brother. Code scares me too. All right, so why on earth did this not work? Have I done something here that... Oh, of course I have. I put it in the wrong spot. Yeah, I put it in the wrong spot. I have been doing minor UI updates throughout the week, and I completely forgot that I didn't finish this one. And appropriately, as is my intelligence, decided to do it the old way. And there we go. Okay, now the issue here is that this didn't actually work. It did a very weird thing where the grid position's all wonky. Oh, I know why. So there's something you got to use this. You have to multiply. Okay. When you get an XY coordinate, you have to multiply it by the true pixel position. So you have to kind of do the reverse. You have to start with your true pixel position in the atlas, convert it to a grid coordinate, and then when you want to reference that grid coordinate to get back to the image in question, you have to multiply it by the thing you divided it by. Essentially, you have to do the reverse operation of how you got to the grid coordinate in the first place. So I have to I already have a variable to make this a lot easier, which should now, there we go. We've got an up. Yeah. Hey, what's up, Ross? I went live yesterday. It's 0008 here. How you doing? I'm doing well, Ross. How are you doing? Good to see you. I guess I went live yesterday. Okay, now my other issue is that this takes up the full width. I think that's fine because when we remove the, well, you know what? Let's just remove it right now. And see what happens. Okay. Yeah. That looks a lot better. I am not closing a div somewhere. I think it's right here. Let's try this. There we go. Okay, that looks a lot better. The cancel button is all the way over. And now if I do, I guess this doesn't work. It's got to be on load. If I change the, maybe it's the zoom size. Let me change the zoom size and make sure. No, I think it's set. So, yeah, here we go. Yeah, look at that. So no matter what the zoom size is, or yeah, that's a little bit too small, or the screen size for like mobile or whatever, it's going to, the game's going to fully scale back end and front end, which is great. UI is nice. Did you use React? Yeah, of course. No, you know, here's how you know I didn't use React. It's really easy. It's an easy thing to tell. How do you know Spiro did not use React? Because this game's not done. If I had used React, this game would be done. It'd be way slower, but it'd be done. Hey, Laugh, how's it going? Good to see you, man. What was the blue flickering? The blue flickering. I'm not sure. Don't know. Don't know, Laughing Panda. Derailing Spiro is way too easy. I don't know what you're talking about. I'm extremely disciplined and 100% focused on the task at hand. I've never been more focused. I don't know what you're talking about. Okay. This is a decent start. We're actually using icons here. The next thing that we kind of want to try out is, can we scale, can we change the number based on like clicking this, you know, or whatever. Now this is the part that gets a little bit tricky. Just messing with you. I know, Ross, I know. Made much progress since last stream? Not very much. I got some animations in for the NPCs. Like there's a walking animation now, which just is constantly on. There's a shadow, and I got some menu items working. I updated the UI for the battle a little bit. Like you have to confirm where you're going, and then the ship animates over, and then the other ships take their turn, and then you can kind of, you know, I can't remember which one's the yeah, anyway, you get the point. When I went from when you went from port view to menu, there was a blue flickering to menu. I don't know. I refresh the page sometimes because I don't have proper what would you call them, like exit functions for some of these menu items. Some of them work fine, some of them don't. So sometimes I have to refresh the page, and so there's a flicker, I guess, from the reload. Perhaps that might be it. Did I make a lot of progress since you last saw, Ross? Yeah, that's good. I'm glad. Yeah, all the big mechanics I think are done. It's nitty gritty details, right? Like updating the UI. Yeah. So okay. So this is the part that's problematic. It's great if I want to click on the arrow buttons up or down. It's super easy because I can just do a JavaScript based increment of an HTML element. What's not as easy is determining when the value needs to be passed back into WebAssembly so that the game state is updated based on the values that you've chosen. Sometimes you need to do it and sometimes you don't. The other thing that's tricky is oh, it was have I lost it? What's the other thing? Oh yeah, right. Clicking it is one thing. Tapping it with your finger is another. Using a gamepad to push a button when it's highlighted is yet another. So I need a more of like a generic function that tracks when this thing, an up arrow or a down arrow has been triggered, which updates the value in question, which then may or may not get passed back to our WebAssembly code to manage the state of the game. And that generic function for incrementing or decrementing or whatever UI functions we need needs to be generic enough that we can pop in or attach that function to whatever input mechanism the user or the player is playing with. So I can't I can just do a click. This is really easy, but I would like to focus on some basic UI components that we can utilize on any input mechanism that the game needs. I heard a Twitch something or other. Let me just check Twitch here. 0x Ahmed 0x. Thanks for the follow just now. I appreciate it. If you are here, say hi. But if you're doing a flyby follow, I appreciate it anyways. That's you. That's you. How are you doing, man? Good to see you. Thanks for popping in. I appreciate it. The likes and the follows and stuff definitely help. So every single one of them is appreciated quite a bit. And feel free to ask questions, everyone. It's okay if you nerd snipe me or distract me or whatever at it. It's a chill stream. I'm just working on this UI stuff, so it's not a big deal. Ahmed, I'm good. Hope you're doing great too. I am. I'm doing well today. Thanks for asking, man. I'm glad you're doing well. Okay, so I suppose what I should be doing here is creating a function inside of the web component. Oh yeah, and by the way, I'm using web components. If you don't know what web components are, they're an extremely powerful, standardized, pretty much all browsers have them by default. You don't need anything extra. It's part of the browser specs. You create custom HTML elements and you add specific attributes, features, and functionality that your common HTML element probably doesn't have. Now, purely technically speaking, there is actually very little difference between a web component and a regular HTML element. The difference would be that you can listen to when a web component is attached to the page and when it's detached. I think the other thing you can do is listen to when attributes are changed. An attribute would be something like the style attribute here or the ID attribute on this div element, or other attributes might exist like here, like method on the form. That's an attribute. I think you might be able to still do that on regular HTML elements, but bare minimum, the key difference, it might only be the one of 2 or 3 differences between a web component and a regular HTML element, is that you can listen to it when it's attached or detached. Now, oh yeah, there's another thing I just remembered, but it's not relevant to this topic. So what you can do is you can encapsulate a bunch of functionality that you want an HTML element, a custom HTML element, to do for you. So a bunch of my UI interface stuff is now wrapped in a web component, which means that it doesn't matter if I move this component from, say, wherever it is here in the tree to down here. The component, the web component, is essentially going to maintain the code that I created for it. So up here, you can see all this code for the dockyard, which is part of the game, which is where we're at. We're in the dockyard. We're about to set sail. We want to supply our ships with food and water and cannonballs so we can attack stuff or defend ourselves. That HTML and any JavaScript functionality and any data attributes and whatever are all part of the web component. All this code is part of the web component, which means that I get to copy or move this web component sorry, which one is it? It's this one, UI dockyard. I can move it anywhere on the page and it just carries all of that with it. Now, outside of the video game world that I'm creating here, in the web world, what's nice about this is that you can listen to when the web component is part of your DOM tree on the, like inside of your HTML, without having to do something called a mutation observer. A mutation observer is something you would typically do for regular HTML elements like your div, your header tag, p tag for paragraphs. There's all kinds of standardized tags which are HTML elements. And the mutation observer is a JavaScript-based listener. It listens to the entire DOM tree or to a specific portion of your DOM tree or your HTML elements tree. And it will listen when things are changed. However, it's expensive. It's performatively expensive. And the entire concept of the stream is, of course, we do things as minimally as possible and we squeeze every inch of performance that we can possibly get. So web components seemed like a super simple no-brainer fit for what we're doing. Because if we did need to listen to when a component was attached, and for multiplayer, I think that's going to come into play here, then we don't need to have a computationally expensive thing like a generalized observer listening to our entire HTML tree to determine when a particular piece of HTML has been added or removed to the DOM tree. On top of that, we get the benefit that I explained earlier, which is the web component gets to keep all of its functionality encapsulated to that web component. It's really clear, at least to me anyways, what your web component is doing. In my case, this is the dockyard, so I understand that it's a user interface dockyard element. You can name your elements however you want to name them so that they mean something that it's just really easy to pick up what's going on. You can also use it. There's an added benefit that I think a lot of people don't actually get. There's people who do, okay? But I'm just trying to explain it. When you do something like this, so let's say that let's just pretend we're going to add a style, okay? It's going to be a CSS style. This is kind of outside the scope, although it might have an impact. Like we might actually use this in the game, but definitely for web development, this is very true. So something you'll do is, let's say you want to add a border. All right. So you're going to go like some ID, and then you're going to go border a pixel solid purple. All right. So it adds a border to just a 1 pixel purple border to that element. You can also do it this way. You can go some class border pixel solid purple. You can also mix and match, right? So CSS is crazy. You can do all kinds of things like some class, and then inside of some class, then you do some ID. You can do some ID, and then inside of some ID, you can do some class. You can do some class. I believe it's like nth3 or something. Like there's a way to do like the third element of whatever it is. Like there's all kinds of ways to do these selectors, right? Now, this can sometimes get a little bit complicated because you might have a particular div element wrapped inside of another div element in a very particular use case that may or may not come up in certain scenarios. There are all kinds of edge cases that these kinds of CSS selectors can become like you might be ripping your hair out. As Theo, the corporate shill who doesn't know how to program, would like to say, CSS can be intimidating. So then comes Tailwind, right? Because you're too intimidated to use CSS. And so Tailwind essentially just adds another complication to the entire process just so that you can get back to CSS in the first place. That's literally all you're doing. You're taking like the most stupid scenic route because you're intimidated by CSS. It's really not that intimidating. You don't have to be as dumb as Theo, okay? You're much smarter than Theo. Most people are much smarter than Theo. And you can actually do CSS. It's fine. It's quite capable, and you're quite capable, okay? But let's assume for a moment that it still, even for me, it can still get complicated to do some of these style selectors. What's great is that just like you can do this, div, border, one pix, solid purple, right? On every div element on the page. And actually we could see this running right now. There it is. You can also do it on custom web component HTML elements. So you can go UI dockyard, and then we'll go border 3 pix solid purple. And let's just take the div thing out here just to be sure. And then when we go down here and we open up the dockyard, there is a border here. You can actually tell because it's offset. It is being applied, but the issue is that I've positioned it absolutely. And so it's not going to, let's see if I can't even Z index it. It's the layering. If I take off the border, watch what happens to the edges, which you can see a little bit of the ocean there. That's because of the border. I can't take it off because it's constantly. Yeah, there we go. Okay, that worked. I clicked it at exactly the right time. You can see that it matched more the size because the border doesn't shrink the entire width, right? All this to say that it's an added benefit. And then we haven't even talked about the fact that you can kind of lock off all the inner HTML for a web component and make sure that no global styles affect what's going on inside of here, right? So if you wanted to literally copy the component from one place to another, it's super easy to just embed a browser spec'd version of a component that has everything you need, which you can override if you want, but you don't have to override. My cam died. Damn it. Hang on. Hang on. Why did my cam die? Oh, this is going to be a whole thing to get it back, isn't it? It's going to be a whole thing. It's not. It's not going to work. Yeah, it's not going to work. Here, I know what I'll do. I know exactly what to do. I'll do this. There we go. I'm back. Okay. Not so bad. There it is. I'm back. Okay. Thanks for calling that out. Noticed it. Yeah. So yeah. So that's the nice thing about web components, and I don't have to do any stupid React stuff to get it to work like this. So I've been moving all of the user interface stuff into web components. I just thought I'd take a minute to explain that because it's kind of cool. Cool. Okay, let me catch up on chat for a minute here. Nice that I'm explaining stuff. Yeah, I try to as much as I can, but sometimes I don't explain things, which is my fault. Web components are nice. I said it. You did. And I agree with you, Ross. I think from the C code standpoint, it only matters the high level events, not the input type or component state. Yeah, so Vicente, you're right. I've already separated that out. I even updated the scene. Yeah, I updated all the scenes. I think every single one. I did every single one. And the scenes used to have it so that it would keep track of what state you were in the scene. So dockyard, where you supply your ships before you set sail, that's a scene. And I was doing, looking back, it was so stupid, but it is what it is. I still will not give credit to Laughley in chat for being right about this. Okay, he was wrong about it. I was right. I figured it out on my own. Okay, I was right all along. I'm never wrong. House always wins. The dockyard had a scene system. Well, all the scenes did actually. And they would check to see where you were previously and whether you were allowed to move on to a particular phase in the scene. That was really dumb. To your point, Vicente, the code doesn't actually care where you were in order to like determine where you're going to go next. It does to some degree care where you were. In some cases, if we're being really specific about particular cases, like you should not be able to, I don't know, you shouldn't be able to jump ahead from one dialogue part of the scene to another unless you've, say, accumulated through or worked your way through a bunch of other dialogues, because it's pertinent to the game story that you read a bunch of like dialogue in sequence, right? That would be an example of something where you do care what happened before because you don't want to tell the system inadvertently to jump ahead to something you shouldn't be jumping ahead to. But for something like supply or purchase, you're totally right. This is not going to check where you were before. So when you go to purchase your supplies for your ships, it doesn't really care. You can purchase supplies for your ships any which way you want. The C code doesn't care. The C code, all it has to worry about is if you tell me to supply my ships, do you have enough gold? Do your ships have enough cargo capacity? Have you purchased more than your ships can carry? Are you still able to set sail? Things like that. And it shouldn't care about your user interface. So I think on the C side, we're okay. We just have to tell it that we want to take an action. It's the browser side where I have to create an abstracted function that can be used by your gamepad, keyboard, mouse, or clicking or finger tapping. And that would also mean that that abstracted function, it's a user interface function, you can't really copy it on desktop because you're not going to run like on desktop. I'm going to use something like SDL and Odin or something. It's not JavaScript, right? But you can copy the same, I guess, mindset of that function, which is when you click on supply, what is the equivalent desktop function for that? Maybe it is a click, but you're not going to do it in JavaScript because you're not going to run this on a browser. Maybe it's some OpenGL direct input thing, or something along those lines, or like a gamepad input or whatever. So the same concept would still be true, which is a generalized function that says I have triggered or whatever. I've triggered or incremented or decremented or whatever it is. But just give me a different source for that action. And then from there, it'll kick it off to the C code if that's what it needs. But in the space of web on a browser like we have, I just have to deal with it in the JavaScript world. So you got to go to sleep. Okay, no problem. Thanks, Ross. Have a good night. Sleep well, man. Thanks for popping in. So what I would want to do is have a look at, I would want to have a look at the icons themselves. and kind of work my way back. So these are the icons. I've just inlined the styles because we're just web componenting the HTML inline. For performance, it's faster that way. The question here is how do I start this? I suppose what I would want to do is attach an event listener. I got to think this out for a minute. The downside of event listeners is that they stay inside of the JavaScript like memory pool. And I cannot guarantee that they're always cleared unless I clear them myself. And there's only really two ways to clear them manually. One is by doing an add event listener and remove event listener, but then you have to have the exact same whatever you do for add event listener needs to be exactly the same for remove event listener. That is it. If you've ever done that, it's annoying. It's really, really annoying. The other way is using the abort controller. Sorry for the flashbang. The abort controller will let you attach a general controller. You can create as many of them as you want and attach them to an event listener along with a click or a mouse down or mouse up or key down, key up, whatever it is. And when you call abort on the controller, it clears the event listeners out of the JavaScript memory in the browser. I might use this, but I need to think about what I'm actually doing, because an event listener is tied to an action, which is key down, mouse click, mouse down, whatever the action is. And I don't think that's what I'm talking about here. I'm talking about an abstracted function that can be called by anything that is associated to this icon, which would be up, and then this icon, which would be down, which would increase the number or decrease the number. So the abstracted function, if I think this out logically, okay, so I would want to have an abstracted function that does not care how it was called. So if I'm going to do that, I would we'll kind of pseudocode it out. This is also good for web, by the way. If you're building a website, these kinds of little nitty-gritty details are important. This is the stuff you'll never learn if you use React or Vue or Svelte, or pick your poison for absolute crap web frameworks. None of them encourage you to think about the performance impacts of your event listeners, what happens when the page is reloaded, or when you make a change. What happens if you add an event listener to an element and then you remove that element? Are you 100% sure your event listener got removed with that? Because I can tell you that there is no 100% certainty that it did. But if you ignore these things, but you're never taught these things in boot camps or online materials or your favorite framework, they don't teach you these things. And so, of course, these things look intimidating. They're actually not. You just need to put a bit of brain power behind them. So my pseudo function would be something like function increment number. We'll just, whatever it is. There's no input parameters, because what the heck do we need an input parameter for right now? And what we would do is we'd go and take this element right here, which has an ID number. And so we could do something like, well, if you're in the web component, you can use this, which references the web component. And then you can use the query selector inside of that and query select your element. And you grab the inner HTML. And the problem here, current number. The problem here is that this is treated like a string. So we're going to have to turn it into a number in order to properly increment it. Here's what happens when you take a string and you try and increment a string in JavaScript. Doesn't work. You could even do something like some test. Doesn't work. You could even do something like, then it just depends it, right? So you could do, it doesn't work, right? So all of these are, with JavaScript, you can't just take the HTML value of an element and then treat it like a number and increment it. So we have to use parseInt from the internal number. The other way you could do this, I guess, well, even if you use a data attribute, it's still technically a string. Yep, it's still a string. So one way or another, we have to do this. So we're going to do that. Then we're going to increment the number, and then we're going to put it right back in. Okay, so that's all we're doing. If we grug brain dummy caveman style deal with, tackle this, then we're going to do something like, well, this should be a web component function. So we'll move it right here and we'll go UI dockyard. Good enough. On click, increment number. Okay, we'll go to supply. This query selector is not a function. Is it not a function? I suppose it's not. I guess there's a reference issue. Is it not a function? Yeah, you know what? It's not. It's because this UI dockyard object is attached to the component, but it's not part of the component internally. That's why. That way I can take the functionality of UI dockyard and move it to another component or mix and match. That's why I did that. So let's see if my memory serves me right. There we go. Okay, perfect. So that's how this would work. This is now an inline on click. So it's ultimately not what we want to be doing. We want a more generic version of this. So we'll finish it off by doing the decrement as well. Might as well, since we're here. And we'll go yes. We'll make sure that works. Should be fine, but never making assumptions. There we go. We'll go back to 69 because of course. Okay. So now what I need to do is I have to come up with a way to run increment or decrement number on these arrow icons regardless of the input path. And I need to consider how I'm going to do that. I believe click will take care of it's converted to tap as well. So if you're on mobile, I suppose we can actually test it. If we go here and we do, let's say iPhone SE. Let me set the zoom so we can see it better. That. Supply. Yeah, okay. So click handles mouse click and tap. So we get a 2-for-1 deal there. The other thing we want is keyboard inputs. We we have to highlight the fact that this element is currently highlighted. So if you imagine in typical video games, this is stuff we take for granted because we just play them and, we kind of don't think about it. If you're using your keyboard and your mouse, maybe you're going to use your arrow keys and it's going to highlight a different component on the user interface. So it might highlight a confirmation button. It might highlight an increase or decrease button, all kinds of buttons. You just move around. And as you move around with your keyboard, the different button that you're going to interact with is highlighted. Then you push another button that is essentially an action against the button you've highlighted. The issue I have here is that I don't have a way currently to highlight which is the active button that I'm going to interact with. So I probably have to come up with something to do that. And even if I did, I'm ultimately still going to call this function. And I can tell why it's problematic, but I'm having a hard time explaining why it's problematic. So imagine that I've already highlighted the button. Let's say the up arrow key, and then I push I don't know, the letter Z on my keyboard, and that's the confirmation, I want to interact with this button, or I want to do whatever this button is supposed to do. Well, I'm going to have two function calls for increment number. Let's pretend this isn't a real event listener, but let's just pretend that it was. It's going to essentially be like this. So there's an event listener for click or tap. There's an event listener for on key down. And then we have yet another event listener that we haven't tackled, which is gamepad inputs. Gamepad inputs. Just a sec. Yeah. So I have this, right? So this is the Xbox controller. And so you can imagine in your gamepad input that you're going to use the, where is it? Here. You're going to use the directional keys, and you're going to go up and down the interface, right? So imagine I've got the interface up and I push down, and it goes down to the cancel button. And then here, actually what I'll do is, so it goes down to the cancel button. Then I push up and it goes to the next closest element. Let's say it's the up arrow to increase whatever the number is, right? And then once I get there, let me put it back down to 69 because once I get to that point and the up arrow key is highlighted, I'm going to push A, right? And then it's going to increase it as well. So I have at least 3 different ways to call this one function increment number. Well, that's annoying because I have to track which element is highlighted in the user interface. When I interact with that element, what function do I want to call to increment the number? Again, I will say, this is the worst case scenario is actually in video game land on the browser, because you do have to deal with multiple paths to get to the same place. But the fundamentals, the principles of the solution hold true in web development in general, even if you're not using a gamepad. Because you are at least going to have 3 different input methods. One is your fingers on mobile, one is your keyboard and mouse, and the other is, well, I guess keyboard is one and mouse is another, although it could be keyboard and mouse. So minimum 2, maybe up to 3 input paths to get to a particular function. These are the things that are abstracted away from you in frameworks. You don't learn these things. It's kind of taken care of for you. You just apply an action function to an element, and you don't truly learn how these things are dealt with, or whether the way that they're dealt with is even like good or performant. So what is a good way to deal with it? One way that I can think of, we would track the current let's say highlighted user interface element. And then when an action button, click, tap, input is made, we would check for current highlighted user interface element. And then we would trigger associated function for that UI element. Now, if we're going to do that, then we need to know what is the function that we want to run. What function are we actually going to run? This is still tricky because let's say we add in a special attribute. We're going to call it data function to run, which you can do. Now the trick is, how do you actually run this thing? Just because you have the function inside of a data attribute, inside of an element, does not mean you can run it, especially when we just went over the fact that having the number inside of a HTML element attribute necessarily turns it into a string. So this isn't an actual function call right here, as the number is not an actual number. It's just a string. How do you call a function from a string in JavaScript? This is some of the JavaScript weirdness you get into. So even if I wanted to do something like, let's say UI dockyard increment number, right? This is not going to work. It's not going to do anything, right? The number is not increasing. I can't do this. This doesn't make any sense, right? It's going to error out. You can't run a function as a string. I can't do this here. This doesn't work, right? So what am I going to do? This is super tricky, and it needs to be sustainable, because we have to think about the fact that this is more than just this interface. This is going to be an issue on multiple different types of interfaces that deal with things like managing your inventory system, or I don't know, like purchasing things, selling things, trading, even just your own like self-management of viewing your own fleet of ships, viewing your own items, utilizing items that you have that give you maybe like a buff or a debuff or whatever it is. We need a sustainable way to track what the heck these things are supposed to run, regardless of the input method you used to get there. This is the part where I hit a wall real fast, because thinking through all the different use cases, an answer doesn't jump out at me as like the easy answer. So one thing I could do, I suppose, is I could create web components of web components. I could create a web component that is just this arrow and self-tracks. That's not a terrible solution. It's all browser spec. There's no framework jank. All the browsers support it. It's part of the default. I could just create an arrow up web component, an arrow down web component, and it's an input method, like a way to tell the web component that it needs to do something. However, if I then the follow-up issue is, if you use that web component, like the up arrow or down arrow, in a different context, for example, not in UI Dockyard, but in, say, purchasing UI goods, or UI general shop where you purchase items. Well, this isn't going to be the same. So now you have a web component that needs to take into account its context, where it actually lives, and then applies a different function based on where it lives. That's not sustainable either. Laughly on Twitch says I usually make a small abstraction for inputs. I mean, that makes sense, but the issue is that web-based is not exactly the same. There's an issue with web where you have a very specific problem that's not as easily solved on like desktop-based input mechanisms. On desktop, is it easier? Yeah, I would say it's easier on desktop. If you're going to use like Odin and SDL, or you're going to render in 3D OpenGL or whatever, that abstraction is actually easier to implement. On web, it's not as easy. So I still think this is the right call. The increase and decrease of the number should live on the general web component itself, because that is the proper context. It knows its own context and it knows what it contains. So regardless of how you got to this function or this function, this web component, which is just the entire Dockyard component, the entire thing, it doesn't care how you called that function. All it knows is that when you call the function, it properly understands where you are and increases or decreases the number. That's it. So that's fine. No issue there. So then the real issue becomes, let me put back on click. The real issue becomes the input method that you used to call the function on this UI Dockyard web component. That's the real issue. The function itself lives in the right place, but click, key down, gamepad input, all of these things have a problem. Okay. So now I'm envisioning something I was trying to avoid doing. What's up, Vim Diesel? What's up? How you doing, bro? Now I'm envisioning an input trapping mechanism. What's a good way to explain it? Input keyboard. Vim Diesel on Twitch is like, are you really using Sublime? Yeah, I am. I have been like for a long time. VS Code is crap. It literally kills your brain cells. Don't use VS Code. Yeah, and Vim sucks. So I use Sublime. How you doing? I'm doing well. Thanks, man. You're doing well. You're doing good. Good. What about Vim? Vim sucks. Every time that I've tried to use Vim or NeoVim, it never works correctly. There's always some kind of stupid update that breaks it. So screw that. I'm done with Vim. Sublime has never failed me, like not even once. No, I don't want to use a distro. Actually, technically, I am using a distro. I've got a Ubuntu. Yeah, anyway. At least use Vim bindings. I actually don't like the Vim bindings. I'm not going to lie. This is just a personal opinion. Oh, a NeoVim distro? No, I have used a NeoVim distro. Actually, yeah. And that one was the worst one. Yeah, I used LazyVim. LazyVim was the worst experience. It broke NeoVim all the time. And I don't like the Vim key bindings. This is just a personal opinion. It is not. I will literally call you an idiot if you use VS Code, because I think you might actually be an idiot if you use VS Code. Okay. If you're using NeoVim or Vim, it's more of like a flavor thing. It's a personal opinion. It's just what works for me, what works for you kind of thing. The Vim key bindings for me feel like I'm pushing a whole lot of buttons to do a lot less. It's just me. It actually slows me down. I understand why it speeds some people up. I totally get it. It makes total sense to me. It's not a bad thing. It's just, for me personally, it has never worked. And I've spent 1.5 years trying it straight. I'm not joking. I spent 1.5 years in NeoVim straight with the key bindings exactly the way that most people would have them. Does not work for me. Wow, I've tried LazyVim. It was good. I know a lot of people say LazyVim works for them, but it broke for me all the time. And I really wanted it to work. Because I really like the concept of Vim in the terminal, like, a lot. And I still use Vim in the terminal quite a bit when I'm doing server management stuff. Super handy and fast, very fast. It almost doesn't get faster. So I get it, but just for me, it's never worked. Vim bindings is in my brain at this point. Yeah, see, so that, it makes total sense for you. User works for you. Yeah. If you're in Vim and you're using Vim key bindings, man, I won't trash talk you. Maybe a little bit, maybe just a little, because it just feels like a lot of key typing for, I don't know, just sometimes. But anyway, just me. I'll stick to it's just me. But good to see you, Vim Diesel. Won't trash talk them unless it's, yeah, laughfully. Yeah, that's right. You just wanted to make me laugh, not make a hot take or something. Yeah, but Vim, bro, what channel are you on? Whose stream are you watching? Have you watched me ever? I am nothing but hot takes. It's just one hot take after another here. And if you give me an excuse for a hot take, I will take said excuse and hot take it. But you wanted to make me laugh this time? I appreciate it, Vim. That's very nice of you, Vim. I did laugh. It was good. It was a good time. I had fun. So I had fun. That's what matters, isn't it? It matters that I have fun. Let me just take a minute and think about this. Just a sec. I am envisioning a system where all keyboard inputs, all mouse and tap inputs, all gamepad inputs have a what would you call it? Like a crap. It's a thing where, like, you can listen to them, like you can listen to when a keyboard input is pushed, and depending on the priority of the thing that's listening, it will take over the keyboard input, execute an action, and then it may or may not release the keyboard input to the next thing in the chain of everything that listens to the keyboard input. I can't think of proper nomenclature for that kind of a system, but it's like yeah, thank you. I appreciate you. I appreciate you too, Vim. Observer, maybe that's the right name, but it might be observer. Listener, I guess, pub sub, like where you have things that have subscribed to events, I guess, and then the publisher, which is the keyboard event system, ships it out. I guess that is an observer. I suppose that is an observer. It could be pub sub or observer. Why? What does he do to you? You don't want to know what I do to laugh, leave him. At the ripe old age of 40, my takes remain hot. It's true. Yeah. It's true. By the way, I should probably update my title. It is my birthday coming up next week. So I'm going to be the ripe old age of 41 next week. Observer pattern, I think, is correct. Anytime you push a keyboard input, you're going to have any number of things that listen to that keyboard input. Anytime you tap, anytime you click, anytime that you push a button on the controller, right? You're going to push a button and any number of things can listen to the button push. And those things will determine whether or not they need to in whole capture that input and do an early exit, or simply listen to the input and execute their own action and just let everything else continue like normal. So that's probably what needs to happen here. And so now we've switched from user interface design to I now have to build an input pattern. Crap. Yeah, Laughing Panda. You've known me for over a year. Yeah. Lots of people have. You know, it's crazy because right now I have like 5 viewers on Twitch. It's nothing. It's nothing. I mean, I might have a few on X, Pi X, if anybody's watching on X. I probably have 1 or 2 on YouTube, maybe 1 or 2 on Rumble, maybe 1 or 2 on LinkedIn. So I really don't have that many people, even though I've been streaming for like a year and some odd months. And yet the people that I know from my streams are long time viewers. Yeah. I'm doubtful an observer for input, but we'll see what you have in mind. Okay, you're doubtful, huh? I don't want to start implementing it until we think it through a little. This is not... See, okay, here's the be more consistent. I know. I'm not consistent enough. I know. It's my own fault. I get it. You're right, Laughing Panda. I can't deny it. It's difficult with work and a kid and all that. It's not easy, but you're 100% right. I should be more consistent. Okay, let me think this through for a minute. We have the same issue as we did with event listeners, where you're going to listen to an input event on any given element. Same like we do with the on click, or if you were to go, let's say, window.add event listener, right? And it'd be click, and then you do whatever that is you want to pass in the event, and then you'd listen to the event. So this is the same kind of setup. The issue is that when you want to remove the event listener on the entire window, you have to do the exact same thing. And I actually don't think anonymous functions would even remove the event listener. I actually don't think they would. So this event listener would just hang around. And the same goes with element based. So if you had number, crap. There we go. Add event listener, crap. Right? So if you did, it's the same kind of deal where you're going to add the event listener, or you're going to observe input, and then you need to have a really good way to remove the fact that that thing is observing it. And you cannot rely, like I said, we're squeezing every inch of performance out of this. You cannot rely on JavaScript's garbage collector to properly remove the event listener. So even if we apply an observer to this up arrow, that listens to keyboard inputs. When we update the web component and we just clear its HTML, the automatic assumption, this happens in web frameworks too. Web frameworks do this and they just magically make you think that everything's hunky-dory. It's not always. You clear out the HTML and then you just rely on your JavaScript garbage collector to go, well, what elements did you just clear out? Oh, you cleared out the div ID dockyard, you cleared out the div class outer border, etc., etc. It will go through all the HTML that you cleared out, and then it will say, did you remove anything that had an event listener attached to something? And JavaScript garbage collector is supposed to go, oh, you did? Let me clear that out of the memory pool. Well, JavaScript doesn't always do that successfully. It's pretty good at doing that, but there's zero guarantee that it's going to do that well. And you can have a never-ending amount of listeners hanging there if it's dealt with incorrectly. I actually have the same issue with an observer pattern, where if you have an input that's like a keyboard input at the document level, and you push up, down, whatever buttons you have here, and then it goes over, let's say it's just an array of elements that listen for specific inputs. Hey, that's great. But when you remove those elements, you now need a cleanup function to 100% guarantee that everything you just removed in terms of HTML elements here is also removed as like a listener or an observer of your input path, whatever your input path is. So we now need a way to have the web component track the clearance of itself, which we do have. This is doable. We have an exit function and we clear out the HTML. So we could at this point go, what are all the elements that potentially could have been listening to any input of any kind? Let's go through all those elements and remove the observations of them. But then we also have to ensure that we're tracking that correctly. So this gets a little crazy. This definitely gets a little crazy. This is the main reason I don't like Observer for this, right? But I can't think of a better way to do it off the top of my head. So you know what? Okay. Okay. I have an argument against this. I have an argument against this. Hang on. I think I have an argument for not doing it this way. I'm trying to think. I'm trying to think this out. What the argument? It's like at the tip of my tongue. I'm having trouble finding the right words. Yes. Okay. I think I got it. All right. Here's the argument. It's the same argument you use for anti-pushy pop. Laughly got it. Laughly gets a gold star. Okay, I'll ship you over a gold star and like a little bottle of maple syrup. All right, I'll get one of the mooses up here in Canada to ship it over to you. That's exactly right. If you think about microservices, so what are microservices, right? Microservices are the idea that you have. Here, let me go full cam for a second to get this out. Okay. So microservices are essentially a bunch of servers that interact with each other. How do they interact with each other? It's a pub-sub, publisher-subscriber model, which is similar to an observer model. And pretty much in all intents and purposes, it's the same thing. You have something that you can imagine server A, and then you can imagine server B, C, and D. B, C, and D listen to things that come out of A. So they attach themselves to A. When A has an event that happens, so in our case, it would be something like you click a button. You're going to have servers B, C, and D that are going to get told that a button was pushed. So server A is going to say, well, I got one of my buttons were pushed. So who's listening to me? Oh, servers B, C, and D. Why don't I go tell them that a button was pushed? Here's the problem with microservices. There are a hot piece of shit. They are overcomplicated, extremely stupid ways to solve a problem that never existed in the first place. The fact that most companies are moving away from microservices is a testament to that being a factually true statement. Microservices are not a good way to deal with these kinds of listener type problems. In certain edge case scenarios, they have their place, but they were vastly overutilized especially in the last 5 years as like some kind of panacea bullet, similar to your React or similar framework. It's just going to solve everything for you. No, it didn't solve shit. It made everything just more shit. So that principle carries over into what we're trying to do here. So what we're trying to do here, shut up, Vicente, we need Kafka. Shut up, Vicente. How dare you, sir? So here we have the same problem. And the issue is that you never truly know what should live and what shouldn't live inside of that, what Lafley calls the pushy pop, where a central server pushes out to other servers. Ideally, what we would like to do is pull. In the web sphere, in terms of server management, pulling in from a central server is generally superior to microservices. The reason why is that you can do far simpler paradigms. You can use far simpler paradigms to get to the exact same spot that a microservice would get you to, a microservice architecture would get you to. So you could have like a monolith system, which means that everybody shares the same code, everybody works on the same code. You just define a different entry point depending on the use case, and it's all one structured thing. You deploy the same server everywhere, more or less, and the servers that need to listen to the events that have happened somewhere central get to choose when they listen to it and when they don't. The central server doesn't need to do anything. Does not care who listens to it, does not care who pulls from it. It does not care about keeping track of all the things that need to be updated with particular types of information. All it does is, at worst case, keeps a history of information that it has received or actions it's taken or whatever it needs to keep a history of, and allow others to read that history and get up to date by taking, sequential actions or just jump right to the end or whatever it is. So when it comes time to break that down and figure out what needs to happen when, it's a lot easier of a system to follow. Your brain can actually comprehend. I would actually argue that this is less of there is far less subjectivity and far more objectivity to this. Your brain is far more capable of understanding that thing A up there has a history of things that happened. Thing B down here needs to know that history of things. Where is B in relation to A? You can look at the state of B and figure out whether it's out of sync with A. When you have the pushy pop method where A pushes to B, you never know whether the request was successful. So in our case, we wouldn't actually know if we pushed a button on our keyboard, whether everything that should have received a keyboard input event actually got the keyboard event or not. You wouldn't know whether those keyboard events were successful because you have two different things dealing with like kind of their own two separate worlds that are supposed to be in sync but aren't really in sync. Your brain kind of like it's a bit of a harder jump to figure out the logic behind the sequence of events in a microservice event pushy pop architecture. In the pull architecture, which is whatever needs to know what happened in a central place, just pulls from it. Its own state has to become synced with the state of the thing it reads from. That's much easier to deal with because then you have two separate problems that you can deal with independently. They're not interrelated. The one problem is, I want you to keep track of whatever's happened or the latest thing that's happened. That could be like your simplest method. Just what is the latest button that got pushed? What is the latest gamepad input button that got pushed? Or a history of it or whatever you want to do. And that's it. You're done. That's it. Then you have a way for anything else that has proper permissions or whatever to read from that state. That thing gets to keep its own state. It gets to manage whether it ignores certain history records, whether it only takes the latest, whether it has to go back 60 steps if there's a history of it. What does it do from 60 steps back to the current step? That is now, B is now its own functional piece, and C can be completely independent of that as well, and they can pull from A at their own intervals, at their own times that make sense from a logical standpoint. So I think that's kind of what I want to do here. Let me catch up on chat again. Gummy Wummy, thank you for the first time chat. I'll get to your question in just a sec. Easier to debug there. Laughfully said it on Twitch. It's easier the monolithic one is easier to debug. And you get to keep the same code base for a monolith. So you just choose your entry point inside of a monolith and you break that apart. And that's your, that's what you have to debug. You get to use all the same tools, same language, everything. In a microservice architecture, who knows what's what. What's up, Sneaky? Good to see you, man. Hope you're doing well. Laughfully says, thinking about it briefly, I would probably replicate the UI, the scene, architecture, and update with the input handling. Once you've written a few of them and pattern will emerge, you can redo it with that in mind. That's a good call out. That's a good call out. I will try one or two with the pull method, and then we'll see if we need to go to something else from that. Okay, so Gummy Wummy asks, so there's a singular scene with input handling at a time. Currently there is only one scene that does input handling. Let me think about that, Laughfully. Let me think about that. Let me answer Gummy Wummy here. Is game dev in HTML, CSS, and JS more challenging than using an engine, or is it all about the same? Overall, as an overall thing, I would say that game dev is easier in HTML, CSS, and JS. The reason why is because you get a lot of niceties that come with the web. If you want to do things like even input, what we're talking about right now, input of keyboard, mouse, mobile taps, your game pads, those inputs are like abstracted away for you as part of the browser specifications. I suppose you can make the same claim about game engines, but you also have some other things that are nice, like rendering. Rendering is much easier than what game engines typically have for rendering options. It's easier to render in the browser. That doesn't always mean that it's faster, like in terms of performance, or that you're not going to have problems, but it's generally easier because a lot of things are taken care of for you. Because if you just have the web mindset, you're going to be able to do a lot more with a lot less versus a game engine where you probably have to consider a few extra factors. Here's another thing that tends to be easier, cross-platform. So even in certain game engines, if you want to compile to Linux or Mac or Windows, there are going to be some oddities that you have to cover. Game engines don't cover all the oddities, especially on desktop. There's certain things you can't escape from having to deal with. But on a browser, it's pretty much ubiquitous. And then you also have mobile as well, right? So there is definitely aspects of it that are easier. The real question, Gummy Wummy, is it faster? And just like using a game engine, you can lean on the crutches of game engines and web browsers too much, where you don't understand what's going on with the thing you're using. So since you're a first-time chatter, the primary thing that we're doing here is recreating a game from an era where, well, it's this game. It's called Uncharted Waters, New Horizons, from the Super Nintendo. It's personally my favorite game of all time. And like I said, it's the Super Nintendo, and they have a crazy amount of complicated game mechanics, like a trading system, a fleet management system, crew, wind, depending on where you are. Like wind factors play differently depending on where you are in the world. Each ship needs its own crew and cargo, and you have different captains and skills, and you can have duels, and you can be a pirate or a trader or whatever. Like, it's crazy, right? And what I'm trying to show is that web has lost its way, but also generally software. We build really crappy video games. We build really crappy websites. We build really crappy desktop software. And we lean on crutches like hardware is getting really good. And you have a bunch of nice things that you get out of the box with frameworks like React or game engines like Unity or Unreal, or things like this. And programmers in general have forgotten what it takes to actually program really, really well. It's not as hard as it looks. It sounds hard, but it's not actually that hard. And because I'm a high school dropout who's self-taught, I'm rebuilding the game on the browser to show that it's actually not that hard. I'm using vanilla everything, vanilla CSS, vanilla HTML, vanilla JavaScript. I'm not even using WebGL or WebGPU. I'm not using Canvas. I'm just using DOM elements. Now, is this hard? Yeah, it's hard. Would I say it's harder than using a game engine? Probably in some respects. But the real key difference is that whether you're using a game engine or whether you're doing it this way, the difference between something that's going to actually stand out versus not is how much time and effort you take to understand what the hell is going on under the hood, and what has been abstracted for you that you don't understand has been abstracted. Why was it abstracted this way? Was it a good abstraction? Is it an abstraction that fits your needs? Are there better abstractions that you can use for yourself? Do you even know how to build an abstraction to begin with? These are all things that people have forgotten in the programming sphere, and so we just get a bunch of crap. I think that's the real difference, although I would say that the browser makes certain things easier than a game engine, especially when it comes to cross-platform. Good to know. I've been messing with Godot, but been wanting to get into JS on game dev side to kind of learn it so I can use it for future jobs rather than Godot, but I don't know. Okay, I've been trying to teach myself code, but struggling to find intriguing projects to learn rather than calculators and other typical projects. Okay, so here's kind of the problem that I think you're going to run into, Gummy. You're going to have, on the one side, you want to get a job, right? And so your best chance of getting a job is to learn something like the frameworks that I hate, like React or Vue or Svelte, or literally pick any web framework. I hate them all. They are all unnecessary abstractions to accomplishing what a vast majority of the web actually needs to do. So there's a disconnect here, right? Which is I need a job, but I also want to learn, like I want to be a good programmer. I would argue that if you learn JavaScript vanilla, you learn CSS vanilla, you learn your HTML vanilla, it gives you an easier entry point into the abstractions that you would then want to use. So you could do a bit of both, where you just pick up some basics without any frameworks or libraries, and you just deal with some of the browser specifications. And JavaScript in particular is going to give you if you do it in JavaScript in particular, it will give you a really good overview on how to be performant and use JavaScript really well, especially with like computer science graduates who come out of their degrees knowing only the abstractions, not realizing or understanding what JavaScript is doing under the hood. You're going to have a huge edge over everyone else if you do that. In terms of the projects, this is the take that I've had since day one of streaming. Pick something that is interesting to you, and it doesn't matter how crazy it is. It actually doesn't matter. A lot of people focus on projects that they think they can accomplish. It's small, compact. They can do it in like, say, a weekend or a week or a month or something like that. Forget all that. Just forget it. You are never going to finish it. Even if you pick the smallest thing in the world, it's never going to get done. You're always going to have something to work on. It's never going to be as performant as you want it. It's never going to have the code quality you want. It's just never going to be this pristine thing that you have in your head. So forget about that thing. Instead, focus on something that makes you feel like excited to try and tackle. Just accept the fact that it will never be finished and that it will never be as perfect as you want it to be. Accept those two facts. Just deal with it. It's just life. Just accept it. But one thing that you can do is pick a project that is exciting. So maybe you want to build like, I don't know, you want to build something like a game in JavaScript that has some super complicated set of mechanisms that you think would just be like really cool, never been done before. Holy crap, wouldn't it be awesome if this worked in the browser? I did something similar with a virtual reality headset. I have my Oculus Quest somewhere up here, and I did a Node.js based remote desktop streamer to my Oculus Quest browser so that I didn't have to install any third-party apps, and it just streamed through TCP packets any number of desktops I wanted from my different laptops for work. I put on my headset, I open up a browser local URL, and I could control all my desktops with a virtual reality world. I think I have videos of it somewhere. Did it get done? No. Is the code quality great? Nope. Did I learn a hell of a lot? Yes, absolutely. Was it super exciting and fun to work on? 100%. And those learnings I still carry to this day. That project got me a job. So if you just accept the fact that things are not going to be as perfect as you want them to be, just do something that keeps you disciplined and committed to your goal. You're going to learn a whole bunch of crap along the way, and that is worth more than did I finish the calculator project 100%, everything is done, and everything was perfect. Vim says, nice take. Like all this abstractions, the new devs don't know how things actually work. Yeah, that's right, Vim. Hey, Moldy on YouTube. Do I hate Rails? I hate Rails. No, I don't mind Rails. Again, this is what we're saying. Yeah. Do you teach yourself through these games or books? Yeah, I taught myself. Yeah. Show you the videos? Damn it. Do I even have the videos? I do have the videos, actually. I do. I know where they are. One sec. I'll show you. Yeah, they're in here. They're in here. Okay. Shouldn't be that hard for me to find. One sec. No, that's the voice one. They were in here. Did I remove them somehow? I don't think so. Oh, here they are. Okay. Let me make a link of the copy. A copy of the link, I mean. Yeah, all right. So I'll show you guys the VR thing I did. Kind of frustrating in learning materials these days. I guess it comes down to how you in general learn, but man, every course is similar takes. Going through projects or something fun seems the way. That's, yeah, don't do the learning material stuff. Don't do it. Just don't do it. Just pick a project. Pick a project. Like I said, accept the fact. Just accept it. It's just like built in. It's like life. One day you're going to die. You're going to pay your taxes for your entire life and you're going to die. And that's life. And you're probably going to suffer along the way. Just deal with it. That's life. Sorry. At the ripe old age of almost 41, next week's my birthday. It's just life, right? You just accept it. So just accept it will never be perfect and it will probably never be done. But if you're having fun, you're going to learn. So you pick something where you're going to have fun and you're going to learn. So yes, because I'm a high school dropout, I taught myself everything I know. Let's see if this works. Okay. Why isn't it? There we go. Okay. I think this was the first iteration where I had the different desktops on multiple browsers inside of the Oculus world, and I would use my controllers to. I wonder if I can go. Where did the controls go? I don't know where the controls went. There we go. And so you have an on-screen keyboard, which I wrote myself. It passes the keyboard input events through Node.js to the desktop in question. I have my own like mouse pad, left click, right click thing that I built myself again. So this is all, inside of virtual reality. I believe that the window to the left had a terminal input. We're going to find out in a second. But you can see me typing into Notepad from my Oculus Quest to my remote desktop through the HTML-based JavaScript keyboard that is an overlaid HTML element, and it just passes it back and forth. And then same thing here with the terminal. So I would literally log in to the terminal on my remote desktop through the browser on my Oculus Quest home. And again, I didn't need to install anything on my Oculus Quest. There's no app for this. It's just a server, a local LAN server. And so that's that one. Let me grab the other one. So you just pop open a browser on your Oculus Quest and it will load up the web page that runs the remote connections. What's going on here? What's going on here? Oh, I see. Okay. So if I do this. Okay. So this is the one I wanted to kind of copy an Iron Man style hollow table where you have the table in front of you and there were different buttons on the table and then it brought up other screens over top of the table. So this is like version 2 of my attempt to do this. You know what? This isn't gonna do it properly. Hang on. Let me pull up this guy. This should do it properly. Okay, yeah, here we go. Right there, and then we'll go like this. There. Okay. So this is okay, so I just want to be clear. This is run also on a local served website. And this whole world is just a bunch of HTML elements served up in VR mode. There's a thing I used called A-Frame, which converts HTML elements to virtual reality elements. So again, I haven't installed anything. I just load up a local URL. It puts me into this virtual world that I have created, converting HTML elements to VR elements. So there's my hollow table. It's that white table. And then I have some buttons, right? And so the buttons on here, the red button, the black button, the input button, they load up a window which automatically connects to whatever server, like desktop that I want. And then the different buttons allow me to pop up like a keyboard. I think I'm going to pop up a keyboard input. But I can do clicks. I do mouse clicks exactly on the window in virtual reality land. These are all mouse clicks that I run. Right. And so you can see that the message is being received on the desktop side. I'm doing particular, like different mouse clicks with just my controllers are doing different inputs to my remote desktop. I can't remember exactly what I have in this video. This might be not the full version, but I think one of these pops up oh yeah, I'm doing keyboard commands. Yeah, so that's right. So the letters on the hollow table, ASDF, I didn't complete the full keyboard. That's what it was. So I had ASDF and they were being sent over remotely to the window. And then the latest version, I still have it on one of my GitHub repos somewhere. It had multiple windows. So I could remotely log into multiple desktops with a window per desktop, move things around, and then have a full-on keyboard that I could control with mouse clicks and everything. And I would just point at the desktop that I wanted. It would do mouse clicks, and whatever one had the right focus or the current focus, then I would just use the keyboard and type in whatever I wanted to. I could move windows around. And then I think the last thing I did was I got it to the point where I could control individual windows on different desktops. So instead of the whole screen, I could choose like the Sublime editor or I don't know, the browser specifically, and I would stream just that. And then I could have multiple windows open without regard for which desktop the window came from and control the individual windows. I think that was the last thing I had left, or the last thing I did on it. So did I get it done? No. And the code for this is terrible. I do have it in my GitHub somewhere. It's somewhere in there. Code for this is terrible. But holy crap, did I learn a lot about things like quirks around getting remote keyboard commands to a Mac machine, capturing desktop window sizes, capturing windows individually, transporting video streams via TCP, even in an ideal scenario where you're just dealing with it as a local network, was not easy. There were latency issues. I tried to tackle a few of those. I mean, I learned a lot. But like I said, Gummy, it never got done and it was never perfect. And that's okay, because the stuff I learned out of that was way more important than it's done and it's perfect. So when you got yourself the first programming job, the requirements for degrees never got in the way. I would say that the number of times that I have been asked if I have a post-secondary degree in programming is about maximum 5 times. And I've done a lot of interviews in 25 some odd years of programming. People don't really care as much as you might think they do. Maybe when you're starting out, they might care a little bit more because they want to know that you've done something that is somewhat academic that you can at least apply. But you quickly reach a point where if you can demonstrate externally that you have accomplished something really cool or you've really put in some effort, most people tend to see that as opposed to your credentials, like your academic credentials. It's not always the case. Your mileage may vary, etc., etc. But I personally have rarely been asked about my academic credentials. Not never, but rarely. This is so cool. Makes it even better. The hollow table makes it better. Yeah. This looks dope. Yeah, it was dope. It was super fun to do as well. It was so much fun. I loved working on that. That was so cool. I learned so much doing that. And again, like I said, it got me a job. I remember showing that off in a technical interview. No, it wasn't even a technical interview. It was just somebody asking me technical questions. And I'm like, oh man, I've got the perfect thing for this. Look what I did. I did this really cool project. And I was like excited to talk about it. And I could talk about like, man, I had to deal with like the TCP packets. It was a little bit slow because TCP packets requires you to have everything pretty much sequentially in order. There's a beginning and an end to your TCP packets. So imagine sending video streams over that, especially multiple video streams, and then you have to deal with it over like a two-layered WebSocket. Like there's two WebSockets happening because one has to go from your Oculus Quest to the main server, and then from the main server to all the different remote machines. And then it was like a mini microservice architecture, like you start talking about it, you get into the nitty gritty, and the person that you're talking to can tell that you're being like, it's something you're passionate about, something that you learned a lot from. You can speak about many different things. You stuck to it. You accomplished something really cool that was interesting that, nobody, as far as I know, nobody's done anything like this. I could turn it into a product, I suppose. But that helped me get that job. I got that job. I was at the job for, I think, about 2 years because of that VR stuff and the way I was able to talk about it and show it off. And it's an incomplete, imperfect project. Go figure. I remember someone saying once that the programming software engineering space cares more about what you can offer do today than what you've done in the past. I guess regarding schooling, just always curious about others, especially self-taught point of views. Yeah, generally, yeah. It's a weird, man, tech hiring is broken. It's really weird these days. The initial screening phase is focused on all the wrong stuff. When it comes time to get hired, the reality of why you got hired becomes very apparent. The reality of people getting hired is that they have proven that they can do something that is valuable to the company in question pretty much right now. What you did in the past, this is why I think leak code practices are ridiculous, whiteboard practices are ridiculous, take-home practices are ridiculous, because they don't offer you true insight into how the person is going to operate in your company within your needs today. And that's what people hire for. Overwhelmingly, when it comes time to make that decision, it's about what you can offer today. Sometimes that can come through when you point to things in the past because there's a relation or an overlap. But generally, that does not have to happen with like a pure academic background. You don't have to have a degree to prove that you have some value to offer today. Especially when you can point to something in the past that is non-academic that has value to them today, right? Because I have some basics, tried to get some internships, but everyone has rejected me solely based on schooling, so it's weird. So there you go, Gummy. You're saying pretty much what I'm saying. As I'm saying it, you typed it out. It's tech industry is broken in terms of hiring. Well, actually, just in general, it's just broken. We use the wrong signals. And the final decision is based on exactly the signals that you didn't ask for to begin with. So people are asking you for schooling and then rejecting you based on that, but that's not really what they're going to hire you for. If you skip the schooling part and magic button, you just got right to the end. Okay, nuts and bolts. What are you going to hire me for? Your schooling is rarely going to come into play. It's going to be what you're capable of doing right now. And whether anything you've done in the past is related to it. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. Could be schooling, could be something else. Doesn't matter. That's ultimately the end game. But I don't know. Tech hiring is like in this weird, exactly what you're saying. It's in this weird spot where everybody picks for the wrong things to begin with. And that's why you have jobs that are left open for so long, because people don't even know how to look for what they're looking for. It's ridiculous. But for me personally, in the last, I would say 6 to 8 months, I've only had contract work because of some kind people who I've known on the internet. They're throwing me contract work and it's keeping me afloat. But all the other like normal paths that would normally get my foot in the door at a company, I've always been rejected at 100% success rate of being rejected. In the past, before the last 6 to 8 months, it was easy to get my foot in the door because I could always demonstrate that I knew enough to be worthy of being considered for that like final end game phase. But the industry is in a weird spot where it's not just me. I know a lot of people who are much smarter and more capable than me as programmers, and they're also not getting jobs. It's very, very strange. So it's just generally a bad time. And I think what's going to happen is companies are going to hit a wall soon where they're going to realize that, first of all, AI won't save them out of the mess they've created in terms of hiring specifically, but in other cases too. And they're going to have to hire better. They're going to have to change their hiring practices in order to get the right people on board. And I don't think it's going to take long for people to start realizing that. So if you can hold out a bit. Thank you for the follow, Gummy Wummy. Appreciate it. Okay. Thanks for all the questions and feedback and everything, Gummy. I appreciate it. Rajar Sheikh, thank you for the follow just now. I appreciate it as well. Make sure to say hi if you're here as well. But if not, thanks for the follow anyway, man. I appreciate the replies. Gonna go for a bit for food. No problem, man. Thank you, Gummy. So, okay. All right. I'll keep this train rolling. What are we gonna do for this? Where did we leave off? I'll try and stay a little focused for a few minutes. Hey, Rajar. Good to see you, man. Hope you're doing well. Thanks for the follow. I do appreciate that, bud. Feel free to distract me if you want. But I think where we left off was we don't want to do a microservice architecture on the JavaScript event listeners here. WASM, yeah, WebAssembly. That's right. I'm using C code to compile to WebAssembly. Vanilla, just straight up C code. There's no JavaScript glue with mscriptim or anything. The glue is super simple. I'm using vanilla everything. Vanilla JavaScript, vanilla CSS, vanilla HTML, regular DOM elements to render the game. No web GPU, no WebGL, no canvas, no GPU acceleration. It's turned off. I have a Chrome Canary build where it's turned off. We have 3D mode for the game, which is, believe it or not, vanilla CSS 3D. Believe it or not, that's how we're doing 3D. It's all vanilla, man. So yeah, that's what we got going on here. So, not you, it's me. That's crazy. Yeah, it is crazy, right? Yeah, 3D mode in vanilla CSS3. It's one of my favorite things to show off. And look, I just want you to look, right? And look, it's not just the turn it off. This is the house, right? So if you can imagine a flat 2D plane with XY coordinates and maybe some layers, right? We got some layers in here. So the house is layered like this. The coordinates are not going to be exactly the same in 2D mode as they are in 3D mode. Right? Because if you actually take the coordinates where the roof should be, it should be one back in 3D space from where the bottom and the door will be. But we have this, some simple logic to ensure that this building gets rendered in 3D mode correctly, extracted out from the 2D grid coordinates so that the offsets are dealt with in 3D mode. And by the way, if I pause this, I just want to be clear. This is just vanilla inline CSS 3D. That's it. It's just vanilla CSS 3D. It's just some transforms. That's it. This stuff is not hard, guys. It's not that hard. I don't care what React Dandies and Vue and Svelte and Solid and all Next.js and all these crazy abstractions and frameworks and npm install a bunch of libraries. You don't need any of that. You can do incredible things with just the basic tools here. It's not that bad. If a high school dropout like me can do it, you can do it too. Soon you're going to reveal that you're the god protecting the universe from the 2D hologram at the edge of the universe. Come on, man, don't spoil it. Don't spoil the ending, not you. Okay. Sorry. Okay, just for a minute, let me just ignore chat for a minute. I just want to just think through. You guys still shoot me messages. I don't mind you distracting me, but I'll be in the museum, yeah. Okay, so the issue that I'm trying to solve here is when we open up a user interface system. First, I was going to update the interface system with like nice icons like you get in an actual video game interface, because the rest of the stuff that I've been doing is all like web-brained. Like this is a table with horizontal scrolling. Come on, that's not video game UI. And then we got to the point during the stream where I'm realizing that updating this has a problem. The problem is that you need to know which element, which icon, video game icon is highlighted that you're interacting with, whether you're using your keyboard or like a mouse, a gamepad in the browser, or whatever it is you're using, clicks, thumbs. We need to know what you're interacting with and then execute a function based on that. We determined that event listeners are annoying in JavaScript because you're never fully sure that they're garbage collected properly. That's something I learned the hard way, where when you add event listeners to different elements, even if you clear out the HTML or you literally do a dot remove on your HTML element, your JavaScript garbage collector is not guaranteed to remove your event listener. So if you look at the add event listener, remove event listener, etc., here, there's zero guarantee that these event listeners are actually going to get removed from memory. So there are certain edge cases where JavaScript does not remove them correctly, and then you're going to have memory leaks and other issues which just expand. On top of that, as if that wasn't enough, we have a standardized function that we want. So if you think about, you click the up arrow, it increases the number. You click the down arrow, it decreases the number. That is an abstracted function that should not care about whether you pushed a gamepad, whether you pushed a keyboard button, whether you clicked on it with a mouse. It doesn't care. It just executes the function that increases the number and updates the DOM element, decreases the number and updates the DOM element, and that's it. So from there, we have to determine how do we get a bunch of different input paths to get to the same function, increase number, decrease number. Well, I don't want to have event listeners tied to the individual icons themselves, because like I said, I then have to keep track of the event listeners. It's kind of like a microservice architecture, which, by the way, is the shittiest architectures of architectures that was ever dreamed of, except for some edge cases. The idea that you want to have a publisher send out events to a bunch of subscribers is generally speaking a very poor way of implementing what could be done in a pull-based method, where the subscribers would actually ask for the latest events or a history of events since the last time that they asked for it from a central place. And that means then that if I'm going to do it with these elements, I need to go over to my input system, keep track of events that have happened, and then I don't know, pressing the A key and then the D key and then the W key on your keyboard. And then maybe at that point, this is another reason why I want to do this. Maybe at that point, you're like, you know what? I don't want to use the keyboard anymore. let me switch over to my gamepad. And so you just leave the keyboard alone. You turn this puppy on. You got your Xbox controller, and now you're in the browser using your Xbox controller. And so your inputs have to be accessible to the element that needs to know what your inputs was in the first place. So we need to at least keep something like the last input event that happened, and maybe potentially a history of inputs. And then the up arrow or the down arrow would say, give me that history or give me the last event when I click, when I see a click event, or when I see, I don't know, like when something executes, like, it triggers the action that makes the up arrow or the down arrow run. The problem here is that I think, now that I'm thinking about it out loud, I don't think that's actually going to work. I have a chicken and egg problem, which is you need to know when the up icon was clicked in order to execute a function. So I think I kind of have the order of operations backwards. The up icon does not go to check what the last input key was. It has to be triggered if the last input key was right. So I suppose what I would have to do is, there's two ways to do this. Oh man, this is annoying on web. But this is something that you don't learn in web frameworks. Like React would just obfuscate this away, abstract it away. You don't understand what the performance impacts of something as simple as chicken and egg order of precedence input on elements. What does that mean for your performance? What about event listeners? Things like React just kind of like does it for you, and you have no idea whether it's doing it right. So there are two ways to do this. I either flag every element that needs to listen to any input at all, period, ever, as an element that needs to listen to any input at all, period, ever. When I receive an input of any kind, I just ship that out to all elements that need to listen for any input at all whatsoever. That is the microservice pub sub system, I believe, because you have a central place where an input comes in. It has a list of things that need to know when an input was received, like the up icon and down icon, and then it just tells them that happened. The other way to do it is, anytime that an input happens, actually there's three ways to do it. So let me do it the most stupid way. The most stupid way is, on every frame, any element on the screen that needs to know whether an input has happened has to go and check the list of inputs, like the historical list of inputs, or the last input, and execute if it meets certain criteria. But certain scenes are not animated. So there are going to be some scenes where the animation is paused. So I can't do that. That would also be very performance heavy. If I have lots of elements that need to know when you've pushed a key and run a check on all of them every frame, whether a key was pushed, that's a bunch of wasted cycles. So then the other way I can do it is, crap, I forgot the other way. Of course I did. Hang on. Um, what the heck was the other way? Oh, right. I remember now. Okay. I could have every element that needs an input listen to all the different inputs, but not filter by them. Like I could have this guy go add event listener, click, and it would be attached to the up icon, and then no function event. And then you'd go somewhere here and you'd go like read history of inputs or read latest input. The reason why I think this is still a little bit of a pub sub, like microservice architecture kind of thing, but if you just have a generic event handler, then you can, it makes it easier to remove it, because then you can do something like remove event listener, click. And this function can just be a generic event function. It would literally be like this: function generic generic input listener, like that. And then here you do that. And then here you would change these to be generic input listener, generic, and that will work. That will guarantee that the event listener is removed without having a reliance on the JavaScript garbage collector removing that event listener. It's guaranteed to be removed. The downside, now I have a different problem, which is that when I exit out of the scene, I clear the HTML. So I kind of have to do like, I have to go over all my elements before I remove the HTML. The removal of the HTML makes it so that I cannot have access to the element that I added an event listener to in the first place, which means that removing event listener won't work. So I can't like clear out the HTML until I've removed all the event listeners. And then I can clear the HTML. And even though I have this thing called the abort controller, which is a browser spec way to stop listening to something, I don't actually know that the abort controller clears the event listener out of JavaScript memory. It's able to abort them. Okay. So this is a fetch. And then abortable fetch. But what about abort controller for JavaScript event listener abort controller? Abort signal? Use the event name like this. Yeah. And then you have an event. It gets the abort signal. Okay. Once we, geez, imagine that. An abort controller that's supposed to end event listeners, but then has its own event listener. The answer is based on MDN. Yeah, that's fine. The abort controller seems to work. So your script, yeah, the signal is the controller signal. And then you do that. Let's, yeah, I can't actually tell whether this removes the event listener from memory. It's not clear. Hang on, Twitch is yeah. Okay, you got it, Vim. I'll run Twitch ads for 3 minutes. Yeah, I don't know. Whoops, wrong place. So I would imagine that if the abort controller has its own event listener, it's probably not going to actually remove the event from the browser memory, guaranteed either. I wish there was a definitive answer on this. Using for cancelable requests. How does the abort controller work under the hood? Let's see. I think it just aborts the signal. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it does too. And that means that the event listener is still there. But it just doesn't do anything. It's like a disable. Yeah, it's like it's to interrupt a promise. That's what it is. So there you go. That answers that. A promise. So the promise still lives in memory. It just ensures that the promise doesn't actually execute. So it's not even a remove event listener. I can't even rely. Yeah, I can't even rely on the abort controller for an event listener. Yep. It doesn't actually remove the event listener. The event listener stays in memory. Okay. Well, since we're being sticklers about squeezing every inch of performance we can get out of this, then that's not a viable option. So abort controller is not a viable option. We literally need a way to do either a pull method where the element in question checks from a current state or historical state of inputs, or we need to come up with a way to do a proper add and remove event listener. And we're kind of bound by web rules here. In desktop, this wouldn't be so bad. It's just it's a little bit weird with web. I think that's really what it comes down to. I think you should keep an array of functions that remove listeners. It would have to be an array of elements. That's what it would have to be. I don't think functions would. Well, maybe. You might be right, Vicente. I'm just trying to think it through. I think it comes down to, unfortunately, I think Vicente is right. I have to keep an array of things that need to execute an input command, either potentially or like 100% of the time. So over here on my keyboard, anytime that one of these things happens, and so we could expand this to anytime you do a click, anytime you do gamepad input, whatever it is, there's an array of things that you have to go through. That array would say, does this item in the array require a follow-up action to like execute something? Is that follow-up action exclusive? If it's exclusive, then you stop at that point in the array. You don't handle any other follow-up things from that input. If it's non-exclusive, then you execute the follow-up function, and then you keep going down the list of array elements. And then what you would have to do is when you clear the HTML for, say, like 3 or 4 of the possible elements that need to be part of that queue, clear HTML must start with, what are the elements I'm going to clear? Let me ensure that I run the remove event listener or remove them from the array of things that need to happen. One of the two. It could be remove event listener. It could just be up here inside of this object. It's just an array of things to iterate over. Either way, we have to know what things we're removing from the list of things that need to listen for inputs. Once we've ensured that we've done that, then we clear the HTML, because then we don't have to worry about JavaScript hanging on to event listeners and having leaky memory because of that. And it would be incredible, I think, it'd be super ideal if we didn't even use the event listener system at an element level, but we use the event listener system at more of like the global level, window or document, so that all we really need to do is go over an array of functions to call. We just have to translate something. I mean, it could even be something like UI dockyard add this is a really dumb way to do it, but it would be like add increment number function to input array. Super pedantic, just to kind of, you know, prove the point, I suppose. So you'd come up here, and if you see this function, then it would go over to input keyboard, and it would be like functions to run, and you'd go push and some other, like, let's say, I don't know, this, right? You'd push whatever this is, maybe like this, and then every time you do a key down, you would go functions to run, there's an array, and then you go input keyboard, functions to run length, and then you would go there's the function, right? And so you do that, and then increment number would be like, we'll pass the event, I suppose, and the key code. And so you'd go if e key code is equal to like Z, then you're good to go, and you can, you know, do that. Or we could abstract this too, and we can say, if we go down to here, I think I've set up, yeah, user input A. So that's our confirmation key. So we could just say the action would be confirmation, and then we'd go action if action equals confirmation. And so whatever needs to listen for that combination would. If we get a confirmation, then we increment the number. And so then that way we could also do mouse up, mouse down. Okay, that works for that. It does not work. It does not work exactly for mouse events. No, mouse, no, click. For mouse events, you don't know what you've clicked on. So with a pointer event, when you click on something with your mouse, you need a way to determine what you've clicked on and whether it needs to receive a particular type of input event. I suppose you could just consider a click as a confirmation event. But you don't actually know what you've clicked on. You'd have to track currently selected UI item to keyboard on, and you would also have to track currently selected UI item to click on, and click would just be confirmation of whatever you're doing. So I suppose this would work still. You'd have to filter by highlighted items. Okay, so if we can add a filter mechanism to ensure that we only run functions on items that should listen to it, then I think this is probably not a bad start. I think of a new function wrapping add event listener and pushing the remove to an array. On cleanup, run the removes. You can't do that. You can't do that because the specs of remove event listener require you that you use the exact same function with input parameters and internal logic as the add event listener. So that's why they have, in the example here, they have add event listener with handle mouse down and then remove event listener with handle mouse down, because this is an abstracted way to call that function so that it's exactly the same every time. Because if handle mouse down even has one like input argument parameter as part of the function that's different from the add event listener function, then it won't work. Remove event listener won't do it. So you would have to keep track of all the you'd have to abstract all your functions like this, put all the functions as variables, and then reference those variables in an array in order to do the remove. I mean, I suppose I guess that is that the worst thing in the world? Gotta name the functions passed by closure to clean up function. Yeah, that's right. I guess that's not the end of the world. How would that work for an icon? It's not, it feels icky, right? gives you the ick, feels icky. I don't really like that solution, but it's a doable solution. I guess the only issue with that is if you add an add event, yeah, you'd have to wrap the add event listener. You'd have to. And you would have to you'd have to add context, right? Because you need to add so even if we wrapped add event listener, so let's say we do, okay? We wrap it and we have our own function, Vicente's special add. We're going to call it AEL, okay? And then it's going to be click, and then it's going to be some generic function, and that's it. Well, yeah. So we'll call it action and function. Let's call it just func. Okay. So then we're going to do add event listener action func. Okay, perfect. Great. And then we push this to like input keyboard listener array func. Great. Well, now what we need to do is figure out when we're cleaning up the HTML and we go to remove the listener, now we need context. Because we potentially don't want to remove every function in the array of listeners. We can't do that. Some listeners might live forever. Some listeners might outlast the current scene we're in, whatever it is. So now we have to do something like, if we're going to do remove stuff, right? Then we'd have to go like that. And then we'd have to go if, I don't know, if this is something that should be removed, then remove it. You can have a map. So you could do something like map name, and then it'd be map name push function. You'd have to initialize it. So you would have to necessarily check for something like this. If not, if that doesn't exist in the listener array, then you would create it, and then you'd add it, and then you'd go remove stuff name, and here it would be if, no, actually you don't even need that. You would remove this, and then you'd go name dot length, and then it'd be name I. And then in clear HTML down here, where is it? Here, you'd go UI, no, input keyboard, remove stuff, and it would be like UI dockyard. So remove listener array push. Action func. Oh, I see what you're doing. Yeah, but we're not using ES6. We're using ES5. But I see what you're doing, though. Yes, that would also work, because then you could just auto call the function here. And so then here you just do, no, sorry, not here. Here you'd go whatever this function is. it'd be an action. Let's just assume that we have the action, like the proper action. I mean, we could even just pass it in and just this. So you could do this. You could do like all. You know, you could do a star for all actions that have this namespace. So then how would you add it? I guess what you would do is you need to know which element though. You need to know which element triggered an action. So now this is getting complicated because what if you have a mouse click that's over, like, say in the bottom space here, kind of like what's happening right now, honestly, right? Where we're just loading up the console log with a point click, a mouse click that is not clicking on anything. You don't want to be running through the listeners if you haven't actually clicked on the right thing. And so now you can't rely on document. You have to figure out where what thing is triggering the action. What thing on the screen is triggering the action? Oh boy. Trying to think this out. You would need to grab the element and add an event listener to that element, which means then that you would need to know which element needs to remove the event listeners before you clear your HTML. That's not going to work. That's not going to work. The web makes this really annoying. We'd be done with this now if I just use React or Rust. There is a path. I don't know if this helps, but there is a path, like a when you do a click, it will track the path, all the elements that were clicked as part of that click. I mean. That's source, that's target, capability. Yeah, it's not here though. It might be because we're absolute positioned. Current target. Oh, maybe it's composed. It might be composed. Oh no, that's not it. Where the heck is it then? From element, meta key, related target. There is a way to get the path. It could work. Click event JavaScript get path of all elements. That's the raw dog way, which is literally going through the nodes. But I know there's another way. Nope, that's not right. Get the DOM path, get all elements. Composed path, is that it? Yeah, composed path. Okay, so no bad identifier for what? Oh, sure. Oh, this? Okay. Okay, yeah, this is the composed path. Okay. You would have to on click, you'd run whatever function is inside of the array. You would have to do the exact same thing on your input, on your keyboard inputs. You take the key up. Let's just make sure. Yep, okay. So you can do the exact same thing, except that on the keyboard, you wouldn't actually need that, because if you're doing keyboard commands, you're probably going to be moving a highlight target around the UI. And that highlight, whatever the current highlighted target is whatever your whatever you're going to execute against. On click and on finger tap, it's a little bit different, because you need to know what you clicked on. So I still don't like this. I don't like this. This composed path will get you to the point where you're going to be able to click on something and then go through all the elements that kind of like are parents of the thing you clicked on, which is fine. We can tell what we're dealing with if we go over the array of elements here. But what if you have an element that takes precedence over another element, and then you want to do an early return? And so now you have to keep track of which element should be highlighted. Oh man, this is dumb. This is so dumb. This is terrible. Could I do it at the individual element level? If an individual element exists as part of the HTML on initialization, or maybe something like after we render the HTML. So if we take this guy, we go here, we render the HTML, then at the end, at the bottom here, we go grab the elements that want to listen to something, and we add them to an array of things that need to receive inputs, and then we clear that array after. Then we would know whether the element, each element would be very specifically stored, and it would be able to either return early or continue where it left off. That might work. Spiraling FL, yeah. That might work. What's my time look like? Ah, damn. Okay, I had a 3-hour time limit, and I just hit 3 hours, 3 hours and 4 minutes. So I guess I'm going to have to resolve this offline, and then crap. I don't like any of the choices I have so far. I'm gonna think about this. And then I'll try and come back tomorrow or Monday. It's gonna be either tomorrow or Monday, one of the two. And we'll carry on from here. And unless I have a solution, in which case I'll just explain the solution. And then we'll continue updating the UI so that it feels more like a game UI, not a web UI. That's going to be annoying though. I don't like any of the solutions we have so far. I need a guarantee that things are not going to hang around in memory, and I need a guarantee that I can pass inputs to exactly the exact right element that needs to have that input adhered to. I got to think about this. And it has to be a solution that I can carry over to everything else. So I'm not, no compromises. No compromises. Damn. Okay. Okay, I'm gonna call it here. I'm gonna run. I've got some stuff I have to do today. I'm gonna go take care of life, and try and leave some room tomorrow or Monday to come back on a stream, and we'll keep going. We'll get some of this user interface stuff cleaned up, all right? And we'll keep building out the game. But we're at a, like I said, we're at a good point. Because the big stuff is out of the way. The big mechanics are done. Big rendering, done. Battle system, done. Like, the big stuff's done. So this is the nitty-gritty stuff. What are the security guarantees? Yeah, that's right. Well played. Monday sounds good. Thanks, Left and Panda. I'll try and I should, you're right, I should be more consistent. I gotta figure it out. I have to try, even if it's like an hour a day or something, I have to figure it out. You should be thankful for Rust. Okay, on that note, peace out. Should be thankful for Rust my ass. Rust is piece of shit language. Tells you it's got memory safety, but it's got no memory safety. C is better. Rust crab lying Andes. Get those STDs checked out, okay? Stop doing Rust. Go figure out your friggin' crabs. Peace out, everyone. Have a good day. Have a good night. Thanks for being here for 3 hours. I appreciate